So a warm welcome from my side. I'm very happy to be here and to talk about training of laboratory animals today. As you might guess from this first slide, the focus will be a little bit on mice and rats, like these are the most used animals in our facility. But the principles hold true for all the other animals as well. So what I'm going to talk about in the next 30 minutes, at first I will give you some words about why training or clicker training is so important. Just a few really short words on a theoretical background, which is important to know when we talk about training so that we are all on the same level. And the biggest part I want to talk about is the practical implementation and give you some hints how you could possibly implement training in your facility. So why is training that important? At first, with training, we can get voluntary cooperation with the animal. And it is quite clear that stress is much reduced if the animals are able to voluntarily cooperate, know what is happening, instead of just being forced doing something which they do not understand. And training can provide social and a cognitive enrichment. So the animals can use their cognitive skills to solve problems, which helps them to gain control over the environment. And this is supposed to help them to cope with stressors. And we're putting some stressors on the animals while doing experiments. And it also gives a good relationship to the animals. So the animals are calm and balanced and relaxed when we handle them, when we do experiments. And this is really what we want. We want to work with calm and relaxed animals because this is good for the animals and it's also good for us. So we don't have to work with stressed animals, which is a lot harder and which makes it a lot harder to perform procedures in the way we would like to perform them. And if we have people which are new in this environment, which are inexperienced with the animals, this also might help to give a good start, because we see a lot in our laboratory animal courses that new people are in a bit of fear of being bitten, especially when it comes to rats. And if we start with a bit of training, this really eases the work with the animals. And also when we think about the society and the view on animal experimentation in public, we can say that there are more concerns if the degree of suffering in the animals is higher. And it's a very good thing if we can say, okay, these are the experiments we are doing and they are very important and this is why we are doing them. But on the other hand, we also can show off how we treat the animals. So we say, okay, we do this very important experiments, but on the other hand, we treat the animals as good as possible. So this improves the acceptance of animal experimentation in public. Then it is legally required. I'm not that familiar with your laws, but when we have a look at the EU directive there, it's really stated that we should set up training and habituation programs for the animals, which are suitable for the experiments we are planning. And one last thing, why it is very important to train animals, so it improves the rehoming. We rehome quite a bit of our mice and rats, and the new owners are always very pleased that these animals are very friendly and tame, and that they don't end up with scared, frightened laboratory animals, and they get a good impression about laboratory animals. When we think about what causes distress or negative emotions in our laboratory animals, it's often not the manipulation itself. If I'm going with my pet dog at home to the vet, then he doesn't care about getting an injection because there's a lot of petting, a lot of good interaction at the vet, so it doesn't cause him a lot of stress to go to the vet, for example. But this is usually very different when it comes to our laboratory animals. So we have often not a very good socialization with the human. And like I already said, the animals do not clearly understand what is happening. They have no possibility to actively cooperate. Sometimes people, when it comes to work with mice, people go into the facility, the cage is taken out, and there are some already in some procedures before they're fully awake, these poor little animals. And then they are scared and then don't know what to do. And here we can have a positive impact when we train these animals. And when we talk about training, we have to be aware that animals draw conclusions from everything we're doing in our everyday life. So always be careful what you're doing with these animals and how you do it. But when we talk about proper training, it really means that we have certain behaviors which we want to strengthen because these are the behaviors we want to have. For example, an animal coming to the hand, and there are undesired behaviors, and with training they become less likely. In the lab environment, it's usually operant conditioning, so the animal is showing a behavior and then we react in a certain way. For example, we want the animal to come to the hand, so if the animal is coming closer to the hand, it gets, for example, a food reward. And therefore, it is more likely that the animal is showing this behavior more often. But there's also other ways of learning, and I just want to mention learning of observation here, because we did some experiments with rats, where we housed 2 rats in one cage, and one was trained, and the other one was just observing what is happening with the other rat. And then, after 1 week of training, we checked if the untrained rat also shows the desired behavior. And yes, in 80% of the cases, this rat has also learned what the other rat has learned. So this might be a good thing, might be a thing if we, for example, train mothers in breeding cages, it will have a positive effect on the offspring. But on the other way around, if they learn something negative, it might also influence the other animals in the room or somewhere around. What we really use mostly is positive reinforcement training because it's very effective and animal friendly. And when we talk about positive reinforcement training, we mean that we strengthen a behavior with some kind of a positive reward. This can be food reward, but also can be other things. And this is often used in combination with a conditioned reinforcer, for example, this clicker, and then we talk about clicker training. Just a few words about the clicker, because we have some advantages when we use the clicker. It's very uniform, it's reproducible, and we can really precisely reinforce something and reduce the risk of rewarding something wrong. Especially when you think about training with mice, just imagine you want to train a mouse sitting on a mouse house or on a scale. Then it's not that easy to show the mouse, okay, this is exactly what I want. So the mouse is probably running over the mouse house and you have to say, okay, stop here, right there where you sit here, this is what I want. And you can easily do this with a clicker. And you don't have to frighten the animal because you have to be really quick with a food reward or something like this. And therefore a clicker can be really helpful. But like always, there are not only advantages, there are also disadvantages. So introducing the clicker really takes a bit of time. Just some few really short words on the clicker, because when I talk about the clicker, usually people think about this hand clicker I depicted here on the right hand side. But there are also other forms of clickers available. So you can have clickers which you can use with a food, so you have both of your hands available for training purposes. You can use just a ball pen, it's a little more soft in the sound. A colleague of mine does click sounds with the mouth, this also works. If animals can't hear, you can use visual cues, so there are a variety of options you can use. What species can be trained? I would say there's rather no limitation. These are the species we trained in our lab, but just because these are the ones we are using mainly in our animal facility. So rats, gerbils, mice, hamster. But you can think about other animals which can be trained as well. So I know about trained lizards, for example, or when you're working with fish, you might see a difference. If the fish are fed by hand or automatically, if they're fed by hand, they are somehow used to come to the hand. So you're coming in and they are swimming towards your hand. If they are fed automatically, they are rather hiding a bit more, and you can really see the differences. A colleague of mine used to have a tame fish which he fed by hand. So there are hardly any limitations, I would assume. When you start the training, it's important to be familiar with the species. This is usually the case if you start training, but it's really important that you know signs of discomfort and how an animal behaves if it's happy. It's always a voluntary cooperation if the animal has a bad day and doesn't want to participate in the training, so it's okay, we don't force them. And always good if you are calm. So environment should be calm, then not a lot of people running around there, and also it's good if the trainers are calm. If you're just rushing into the animal facility and think, you know, I have to do quickly some kind of training, it usually don't turn out very well. And the training really starts from the beginning, from the first contact, if the animals are ordered and they arrived in your facility. So really from the beginning, from taking them out of the box into the the new home cage or to the tank or whatever animal species you are working with, wherever they are going, always be calm and friendly from the first contact. And for mice, it might be even an option to consider a breeder, because there are some breeders which say that they do some gentling programs and the animals are very nicely used to handling, and so you have very friendly animals when you open the box. And always make sure that the animals know what is happening. This is what I mean with announce yourself. Like I already said, if the animal is fast asleep in the cage and you turn the cage out, and make sure the animal has enough time to notice that something is happening. And for the first contact, let the animal explore you, put a hand into a cage if you're working with mice, rats, or animals like this, and let the animal just sniff and check who you are and what is around there. What we can say for mice is that if we use non-aversive handling techniques, this improves the success of training. The slide on the right-hand side, we trained mice. One group, the gray group, was tail handled, and the other group was cap handled. And you see that the tail handling decreased the success of the training. So it really starts from the beginning, and all those small steps count. When you set up a training, one really important question is what works as a positive reinforcer, because you have to find something where the animals are willing to work for. And usually this is a food reward. We carefully test what animals like best, and therefore we do food preference tests. This is an example which we did for mice and rats, and so we have a petri dish. We put some different food rewards in there, and then we put the petri dish into the mouse cage for like 10 minutes, and we check which is eaten first. Because we do not want to use food deprivation, and here we use like food with a pasty consistency, because then they can just have a short lick and are not occupied with eating the food reward for a while, and then obviously not working with you anymore as long as they eat. But you can also use like liquids, or there are different things which can be used. With mice and rat, we always end up with white chocolate spread, which they like best. For our gerbils, for example, we use pumpkin seeds, which we cut in really small pieces so that they don't eat that long from the pumpkin seed. And important is that make sure that the reward is taken. Think about how you want to give the food reward to the animals, by hand, apply it somewhere. Just have in mind how you want to do this. We usually start for our mice, for example, like on the picture on the right-hand side here, with applying some of the white chocolate spread on the cage overnight, so they have some time to explore this, to figure out, okay, this is nice. And for giving the food reward to the animals, we use a spatula, because this distance between the hand and the animal sometimes eases the taking of the reward, and also you don't have to bend into the cage all the time, so it makes it a little easier. But this is just something which works nicely for our mice and rat. For the gerbils, where we use the pumpkin seeds, so there we usually use the hand directly. But there is more than just a food reward. Also, interaction with the human can be rewarding. For the rats, we did experiments with clicker training where we clicked, and with this click, the right behavior is marked. And afterwards, the animals get some tickling. You'll probably be aware with tickling is this play behavior, which you mimic with the rats, and which they really like and love. And we see that this works, and we can reinforce specific behaviors with tickling as a reward for these animals. When you think about choosing a reward, you have to consider several things. One thing which is always very important when we think about laboratory animals is hygiene. It depends where you plan your experiments. Is it an experimental facility? Do you do some husbandry training in your SPF barrier? So you have different recommendations. It's always good to talk with a responsible person about which kind of food reward can be used. There are some sterile defined rewards available, for example, from blacks, and which go with GLP studies and which can be used nicely if you have concerns, for example, in using white chocolate spread bought in the supermarket like we did. And you always have to question if it influences your experiments. If you want to do some blood glucose level checkings, then it might not be the very best idea to give the animals a lot of sugar or things like this. We usually check with the experimenter when we do husbandry training, and we say we would like to do this and this. We have some little treats we want to give the animals, and is this okay for you? Is this okay for your experiments? And usually it is. Like always in life, it's good to have a plan. So we usually have a training plan where everything is written down. The aim of the training, what exactly do we have to do during the training, time schedules, what do you have to bring to the animal facility so that you don't end up setting everything up and then you notice, oh, damn, I forgot the clicker or whatever. And in which room should be trained, maybe which time of the day should be trained. And therefore, it's really easy for another person to take over and to understand what you're actually doing. So this is just helpful. This is just an example for a training schedule out of our facility. It was quite a strict schedule. We did this strict schedules because we did a lot of evaluations in the end. So we did behavioral experiments, blood testings, because we wanted to check for several parameters which might be altered by our experimental procedures. So at first it took us a little time to introduce the reward. So we had some days in the time when the animals arrived, so they got introduced to the reward. Then the first thing is the introduction of the clicker training, and then we had in general 3 days of training. So this is a short program because when we first started we had several weeks of training, and we showed this to some experimenters, and they said, yeah, a nice thing, but we can't do like weeks and weeks of training. And so we tried to shorten it and to make it more practically, so make it fit better into the everyday lab life. So we never train on weekends, for example. We always have breaks on weekends if we have longer trainings to make it, to make it as easy as possible. And one of these training days, we have a training session where we have a short acclimatization, and then we have training, break, training, break, training. And in this break, we keep record usually. You don't have to do such a fixed training schedule. You can have an individual training. Be aware that the animals are different. Some require more training, some require less. Even if you have a cage of litter-made inbred mice, you end up with different requirements for training. And you can train until an animal shows the desired behavior 3 to 5 times, and then you consider it learned, and you can go on to the next animal, for example. Another thing I always mention is do not do too much. Sometimes people want to do it really good and then they overdo it. Handling, training, and all the interaction can become too much for the animals and then causing rather negative effects. So make sure that you keep it short, no longer than 5 minutes, I would assume, and that you have small steps which the animals are able to understand. So if you want to train a very complex behavior, don't train it all at once. Start with shaping the behavior. For example, you want to train the animal sitting on a scale. Don't only reward the animal sitting 5 minutes still on the scale. You will never get this whole behavior at once. Start with the animal maybe touching the scale or walking towards the scale, then touching the scale, then putting the feet on the scale, stepping up on the scale, sitting on the scale for a few seconds, then for longer times. And so you can really nicely shape the behavior, and this is easy to understand for the animal, and you don't get frustrated, the animal does not get frustrated, and everything is nice. And also have more positive things than negative things. What do I mean with this? Make sure that an animal is not connecting something like, oh, if this certain person is coming into the animal facility, always something bad happening. So if you're, for example, training injection, make sure you're not always doing just injection. Make sure you have also some training session where it's just something nice, just some good interaction with the animal, or you do just training in one room and then you do the procedures in another room, and so the animal learns, oh, if I'm going to this bad room, there's always something bad happening. Make sure this is not connected. This is how training with mice looks in our facility. So this is the home cage. We remove all the enrichment and we remove the cage mates to a waiting cage where all the enrichment is. And then here it is trained, the mouse is running through this tunnel. The tunnel is part of the enrichment, so we keep it in the home cage. And we have this white chocolate spread on the spatula right there. We have a clicker. We have a lab book for keeping records, which is very important because sometimes something happening. So your phone is ringing, you have an urgent call, or you have someone is coming in, or some building or construction is taking place. Make sure you note this in your lab book, because otherwise you might ask, oh, what happened to my animals? Why are they not behaving like always? And so it's important to keep record like always in the lab. And we also have a timer. So, oh, sorry for the typo. The first one is introduction of the clicker. When we start and want to do clicker training. And when we first started to do clicker training with mice, we tried to do the introduction like it's usually done. So you click and then you give a little bit of the reward, click, reward, click, reward, click, reward, until the animal connects click with the reward. But we had some severe problems with this with mice. So we clicked and then the animal took the reward, or it didn't took the reward, or it did do something else. And so we tried to do it differently. And so the animal was sitting in this handling tunnel, and we allowed the animal to eat from the reward and meanwhile clicked for 10 seconds. No drum roll, just a slow clicking. And then this was repeated for 5 to 10 minutes. And therefore we could introduce the clicker for the mice. This worked nicely. And so we were happy with this method. And we still use it this way. We every now and then try to do it the other way around, but with mice we really have problems here. What can be trained? Really, the limitations of training are the abilities of the animals. So it can start from really small things, just acclimatization to handling to devices, getting on a scale, getting IV injections. Here I have a little video where this gerbil was just trained to come to sit on the hand. And this is really at the end of the training, so it already knows what to do. So it's sitting on a hand and just eating the pumpkin seed. And you could do this for just some checking of the animal, make sure it's healthy, and without any stress, you can pick the gerbil up, like here. So like I already shown in the picture before, the first thing we trained when we started training with mice was running through this tunnel. This has no proper sense, to be honest, rather than establishing the training. But it's a very easy thing to do because the animals are familiar with this tunnel. It's part of the enrichment. It's used for cage change. So therefore, the animals run into the tunnel anyway, and it is very easy to strengthen this behavior. And so you get successfully quite easily, if you want to start training and trying out something, I could really recommend doing things like this. This is another short video I just want to show you where we trained a mouse to follow a target stick. And in the first round, you can see smaller steps are rewarded. And when we do the second round, only the whole behavior is rewarded. So this is really how you would build up your training. So at first you reward small steps, and then if the animal already knows what to do, you can reduce the number of rewards. Like I already said, there are individual differences. Don't get frustrated if one animal is working really nicely and another one is not working very nicely with you, or if a group of animals is not participating as well as the other group. This is just happening. Animals can also have a bad day. Some animals need a little longer. And as you can see on the right-hand side, this was an evaluation after 1 week of training, and you can see the individuals, the dots are the individual animals, and they show quite a variety of repeats they are shown of the desired behavior of the trained behavior. What we can say that the benefit is independent of the performance, so we have never seen correlation between an animal which is performing very good at training and the beneficial effects for these animals. So there are still beneficial effects even if the animal is not performing as good as other animals. And training in general can be very nicely adapted to the specific needs. It can start with just a positive contact. So this is what we're doing when we do husbandry training. We have just some little treats which mice get, so the animal caretakers open the cage, then they get some treats, and this ends up in animals being less scared of the humans. They are really attentive. You open the cage, they are already looking, what is going on here, do I get the treat? You can train as a cognitive enrichment. You can try to reduce boredom, which is quite a problem in our laboratory animal facilities with such trainings, because we really see that this training is somehow rewarding for the animals, so they really like it, they like participating in it. You can do quite simple tasks like sitting on a hand for checking the animal, sitting on a scale if they have to be weighted in an experiment, blood drawings, but you can also teach very complex tasks. I've got just this one example on the right-hand side. This is a mouse on a catwalk. A catwalk is a behavioral test for gait analysis, where they have to walk in like a steady velocity, and they should not turn around, sniff somewhere. And we had a group and they asked us, oh, we have some problems with this catwalk test. We always have some animals which do not meet the criteria, which we have to exclude from our analysis. So we always have to take more analysis for the test to get our group completed. And so we trained them like I showed in the video, with following a target stick. And then they got trained on this catwalk test, and we really see improved compliance on the catwalk test and reduced signs of distress. You can use a clicker. You don't have to use a clicker, especially when you train really easy behaviors. You don't need a clicker. You don't need to do the effort with introducing the clicker. But if you want to train more complex parts, I would recommend using a clicker. You can even try to start training without the clicker. And if you notice, oh, it's not working out that well, you can later introduce the clicker and do it with a clicker. And something I always mention is that it's important to have a good balance between the training and the purpose where you are training for. If you just want to do some husbandry training and have nice and calm animals, it's probably, yeah, you don't have to do like 3 weeks of training, or if you want have just one blood collection, and I would tell you, okay, you have to do 3 weeks of training every day, 5 minutes per animal, and yeah, you will probably say, okay, no, I don't do this because it's a lot of training and maybe it's not worth it. But if you have really complex experiments, it helps you a lot if you do a little more training. So what did we achieve with our training? I can tell you that we have, after 2 to 3 days, simple tasks can be learned by these animals, which I showed you, which we trained. We never failed with training a species, so I would just recommend to try it out, because with all the species we tried, it worked out very nicely. We see more interaction with the humans when we do a test of interaction. We see less anxiety-associated behavior. We performed a lot of behavioral tests. And in mice, we did experiments where we trained animals, and after 6 months, we redid the training without any training in between, and they could still remember the training. Yeah, like I mentioned, we have good results with all different mouse strains, rats, hamster, gerbil. And we have this good results with learning through observation. And I hope within the 30 minutes I have convinced you that training is quite easy and can be really flexibly adapted to your own needs. Of course, more elaborate programs generally achieve greater or more long-term effects, but also very small programs can help a lot. And these trainings can be nicely integrated into experiments, and it helps you to reduce stress for the animals, but also for the humans. And it's also rewarding for humans if you can give something positive back to the animals. It's really a nice thing. And if we have less stress, it can enhance the reliability of our results. So we don't measure stress artifacts. And in general, this can contribute to a culture of care we talked a lot about in the recent years. And with this, I want to say that you can always do something, and also very small things can have a good and helpful impact, which are very good. And with this, I would be happy if you would give it a go, and I'm happy to take questions right now, but also later on. If you have questions, me and my team, we're always happy to answer your questions, and you can just write me an email. And with this, always remember, only happy animals make good science. Thank you.